Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am, of course, your host with the most, and today's guest is the founder of eReleases, which was created over 24 years ago, to help small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility through press release marketing. He lives in the Baltimore area. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mickie Kennedy. Mickie, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Mickie, you started your entrepreneurial journey about 24 years ago with creating this eReleases. Was this your first business you founded, or did you have an entrepreneurial spirit beforehand?
I did have an entrepreneurial spirit beforehand. I had launched a consumer newsletter little business during the .com era, and I sent out, movie reviews, horoscopes, trivia. I had writers who wrote for me, and most freelancers. And I had 3 lists that had over 1 million subscribers, and it was generating good revenue. And I sort of saw eReleases as a natural progression of email distribution, just, building lists of journalists according to their beats and just emailing them press releases and charging clients for that for a fee. And I knew it was a separate business, but it was also being run very similar to my consumer newsletter business. And when the .com crash happened, my advertising revenue for the consumer newsletters went almost zero, and the eReleases business maintained, and so it actually grew through that period. And so I decided to focus my energy on that and give the consumer newsletters up. I felt like the money that was coming from the .com era was enormous, and the amount that people were paying me to go out to a list of 1 million consumers for a joke list was embarrassingly high, and all of a sudden it just vanished. So I focused more on eReleases. I had been interested in the press release arena because I had worked previously as a research analyst at a telecom research firm. But being employee number 3, that means you're a lot more than a research analyst. I was also their PR guy, and I would look at our telecom traffic numbers and pick out anomalies like, hey, why is this country in the Caribbean generating more telecom traffic than all other countries combined in that area? And it was because it was the main call center for 1-900 numbers at the time. And so I was like, oh, that's an interesting story. So I put that story in a press release, shared the numbers, the traffic, and sent it out. And we would get picked up in like The Economist and Financial Times, Washington Post. I got really good at fleshing out stories behind the numbers and just sharing it with the media. And that was one of the reasons when I launched Day Tips that I still wanted to feed the press release thing. And what had happened was I was faxing all of this back 26 years ago. And
Wow.
All of a sudden, journalists started responding and calling and saying, could you just email me your press releases in the future? Because it's easier to work with these telecom numbers and statistics by copy and pasting. And so I already knew that email seemed like a natural progression for reaching journalists. And then I had a newsletter company with all of these mailing lists. I just naturally built out lists according to journalist beats and started sending them press releases. And it worked really well. And then over time, the Newswire, PR Newswire, reached out to me and said, hey, you should also send your releases through us. And I was like, hey, I charge my customers $200 or $300. And I know that a national press release on your network is like closer to $1,500. dollars for a 500 or 600 word press release. And surprisingly, they didn't just run away and say, this is not a good fit for us. They said, hey, tell us about your customers. And I was like, well, a lot of them are just mom and pop, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. We work with startups, authors, speakers. But the one common thing is they're not extremely well funded and they can't afford a PR firm. And they wanted to support that. So we found a way to work together, and all of our releases do go out through a custom national distribution with The Wire. But one of the concessions we made is we schedule our releases for next business day or future day so that they have an overnight editorial team that isn't very busy, but they have to be there in case there's a Fortune 500 company that has a recall or an accident, or they just want to send something out to the Asian market. And so they set up our releases overnight. Doesn't cost them additional labor. So that was sort of the win-win we were trying to find between the two of us.
I love how even when a bigger company that usually charges 10 times what you're charging was like, no, we want to support them because they understand at a certain point, those small little businesses will get to a place where they can pay the big guys to do it. Like, obviously you fit a specific market because there's always going to be up and coming mom and pops, up and coming entrepreneurs. They're already out of the reach, but you're that link between them, allowing them, your small people, to feel like they're big shots when they get to go on the national wire.
Absolutely. And some of our clients have graduated on to working directly with The Wire because they want to do like multimedia newsrooms, or they want to do international distributions with translations and things like that. So it has been a really great partnership. And I still get excited that my clients for a few $100s can go out over The Wire, as well as our email distribution.
No, I think it's showing that collaboration is actually the key, because everyone's collaborating together. You and the other businesses collaborating, the Wire, which will help all your clients, obviously make them feel better, give more value to your service that you provide. Instead of just saying, hey, we go out to email list, we're like, no, you go to the Wire. Like, we're going big with this. So I think that's a great thing to point out, that collaboration. And of course, if you didn't ask or didn't tell, they would never have even said yes or no. The question would have been never there. So I love that. What made you want to be your own boss? Like, jump into the craziness that is the entrepreneurial world?
I am not someone who likes being told what to do. And I knew that very early in my career experience, that I have to bite my tongue a lot, and I resented it. And so with the idea of being able to make money, even if it was less money than I was making in my job, the prospect of that sounded so refreshing and beautiful. And it's true, you're still working for a different boss, your individual clients, but I found that just a much easier exchange, and it was something that suited me well.
Well, going to the point that we as entrepreneurs have bosses that are our clients, at the same time, we're able to fire our bosses, because if we don't want to work with you, we can say no and we can move on, and we don't have to deal with the stress that usually comes working for someone. So that's another big bonus as well. We can fire a boss. I think this is the only job you're allowed to fire your boss.
Right. Absolutely.
What is it, looking at the press releases, because I think a lot of business owners don't know how powerful these press releases can be for business. What are some of the tips that you have? Like, if I'm going to write out a press release, what is the one thing that I should always make sure that I have inside that press release?
A really compelling headline is probably central to any good press release. Keep in mind that journalists skim, so you want to work with the most important elements in the beginning of the release and work down to the sort of background information and things like that. Having a powerful quote in a press release is something that a lot of people overlook. Most quotes appear as a safe statement in the midst of a press release attributed to someone at a company, but it doesn't say anything meaningful. It doesn't say anything that can't easily be paraphrased or written better by a journalist. So, the time to be put your creative writing head on is to really create some elevated content where you're extremely concise or analytical, or you say something that is just really powerful. Could be contrarian, could just be going along with what other people are saying in the industry, but you've said it in a way that's so beautiful that if that journalist was to paraphrase it, there'd be a loss. And that's one way to preserve that you get into an article. Is to have a powerful quote. What a lot of people don't know is that sometimes you can inspire an article with a journalist and not be mentioned in the article. And having a powerful quote is one way to preserve you being in that article and making sure that you, in the context of who you are with your company, that your company is included as well.
I kind of want to know, since this seems like your business, the eReleases, do you handle writing all the releases, press releases for your customers, or do they provide it to you and then you just send it out to the lists?
So I would say about 95% of the people provide their own press release, and about 5% use us for the writing service. I would say take a stab at it. You can always send us your press release and have our editors look at it at no charge, whether you work with us or not. I think that most people are capable of putting together a press release. What most people aren't really good at is building a strategic press release. Having a press release that's fairly well written, it's written in the third person, not an elevated language or anything outside of the quote. But a lot of people really just, what they write about is what they see other people in their industry write about, a personnel change, a new hire in HR, or they have a new product. And so they announce the new product with a list of features. Journalists are storytellers. It's hard for them to build a story with a launched product that only has features. What I recommend my clients do is add a case study, someone who used the product. What was their experience? Get a quote by them and put it in there. All of a sudden, you have the elements of a story. Here's a new product. Here's someone who used it. They achieved this result. Here's a quote by them, and here's some features about the product. It's a much more fulfilling story arc. And those are the elements that a journalist needs, because journalists are basically storytellers, and they're trying to decide what they want to share with their audience. And so having a strategic press release, something that easily satisfies the curiosity or the need of the audience to know more, is really powerful, and something that I think so many people overlook. I mean, if I could just get rid of personnel change press releases, I would be so happier, because I know why they do it. They feel it does send a positive message to the new hire that here we are, we wrote a press release and we're sending it out to the world. But outside of maybe a little on the move section in your newspaper and maybe one trade publication, it's not going to generate a lot of coverage. So if you're going to send a press release out over a wire and pay for it, even though it's cheaper to go through us, I would still say save your money and use it for something that's a little more strategic.
I like that. That's a great tip, because I see it in the Pod News. One of the newsletters that I am, they have their little news section, and they do have on the move sections, and it's like it doesn't change anything for me. But when they do put in like big moves, like something like a shift in the space, that's what catches our attention. So I love that you're bringing it up and advising my audience when they start releasing press releases. The hire isn't the best. Maybe put it in your newsletter, like, hey, we want to welcome this person to the team. That's probably would be a more beneficial way of doing it. What is it about press releases that you like?
I think the ability of leverage is the thing that I like most about it. Like when I would send out releases for the telecom company, I would just write one little press release and send it out, and we might get 4 or 5 articles, and they would be like national articles. And I was like, wow, that's tens of thousands of dollars worth of, equivalent ad space that we got in these publications, front page business section of the Washington Post talking about us. And I found that exciting because we were a small company and we were just building our business at the time. And yet we were creating lots of buzz, lots of links, lots of customers. And the product that we were selling when I started was $600. It was a report of all this telecom traffic. When I left, we were charging $15,000 for the equivalent data per year. And the customers were telecom companies, and they didn't blink. You know, the price was invaluable. You couldn't get it anywhere else. The owner of the company worked with the ITU because they wanted to collect all this data, but the ITU didn't have the resources to do it. So he said, if you sanction me on your behalf to go get this data, and I agree to hold it and share it in common, so I'm not going to break out in a particular country what telecom carrier is responsible for what amount of this data, but I will publish it aggregately. And based on the fact that they had the relationship with the ITU, there's a trust factor. So a lot of phone companies in countries across the world would share their data, and it made it that the only place you could get this data is through his company. And you know, that was extremely valuable. I mean, I don't know what they charge today. I know it's based on a licensing fee annually, but the last time I heard it was like over $20,000.
Just the start was like pennies on the dollar, and now it's a full on dollar on a dollar here. That just shows the power of having like access to the info, but also access to putting it out there so that people can have it. Because the more information you have, the better your decisions are, especially when you do these press releases, because you're giving value with the information and where people can connect. What is it like working with authors doing their press releases?
So authors is an interesting arena. We originally worked with mostly self-published authors, but it's changed because the publishing world has changed. Most publishers no longer do marketing for their clients outside of like their most important clients. And so we're getting a lot of press releases from people who are being published by traditional publishers, and they're in charge of their own marketing. And I find that it is difficult, especially with fiction, to get across in a press release what makes this book so important. There's usually with fiction the way it's written or the way the story's told, but how do you convey that in a condensed press release is very difficult. I find that nonfiction is much easier to get media pickup for authors. Mainly you want to be able to have an elevator pitch of what differentiates your book from all the other books that are out there. What is your angle, your hook? And you want to share your story, all the aspects that could potentially be newsworthy. And, knowing that journalists love stories, I always advise my clients in startups to share your origin story or your journey through your company. What were the obstacles that you overcame? What was your inspiration? What are the achievements that you've made? And surprisingly or not surprisingly, it's worked a lot of times. I had one client that shared an embarrassing story about how they had to cancel Thanksgiving dinner and do fulfillment with the whole family at a small business because they just got slammed with orders that had to go out for pre-Christmas stuff. And as a result, I told them to mention it. They didn't want to. They felt like, it just makes us look like we're too small, like we don't know what we're doing. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think it makes you approachable and makes you vulnerable. And they sent it out, and Inc. magazine wrote an article about them and opened with that story of them in the garage doing fulfillment over Thanksgiving. And it's something that people relate to. And it made a great story as well. And let's just I want to underscore having a story is so important, or the elements for a journalist to build a story.
No, and it's something that's super important. The storytelling, we're seeing it, and I'm seeing it more and more. I know some of my listeners may not be in the marketing world or dealing with the marketing, but a lot of the sales and marketing are now moving towards story-based selling, quote unquote, if you will. Um, and it's because we're story people. Like, we all love stories. Good stories get connects people with everything. And I would love for you maybe to share a story of a memory of helping someone. Like, I love this story about the press release of this small business getting national headlines because of the sharing the story of their Thanksgiving family fun. But do you have one where you saw, after either releasing a press release for a client or something for yourself, that they were able to achieve the goal that they had with maybe releasing the press release?
Yeah, I've got many of those stories, but one
I
that
figured you have
stands
like
out.
probably
Yeah.
you have a bookshelf full of stories about this, so we're gonna just pick one off the shelf here.
Right. So I had this one client, Alex, who was from Russia and came over to this country, sought asylum, and basically shared publicly his experience with the Russian mob. And after being here for many years, there was a political change, and all of a sudden they said, you're no longer qualified for asylum, and we're going to send you back to Russia. And he had his lawyer hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to appeal it, and finally they were out of appeals, they were out of options, and he actually came to me and said, I've got this press release, it has to go out, something has to happen. I'm on a flight next Thursday back to Russia, and I land at this time, and I've already been told by people I will be dead within 2 hours of landing in Russia. And so we sent out the press release for him. I had my fingers crossed. His congressperson picked up the phone and made all of that go away.
Wow.
And he says I saved his life. It makes me feel, wow, humbled that what I built was able to help him and achieve the result. I mean, he wanted to stay in the country. He did not want to be killed, and he was convinced that that would have happened. And it got picked up that day online on the Wall Street Journal. He was a businessman. He had a lot going on, and it was an interesting story, and it just sort of underscored, at, at times, leaning on the media can get stuff done that normally you just feel like you can't. Another client that we had during the pandemic, it was a small PR firm, created this dining bond initiative, just a very short-lived initiative to help restaurants that were closed during the pandemic, in which you would nominate your favorite local restaurant. If they were able to contact them, you could give them money that would go directly to them. It'd be secured through like a dining bond gift certificate arrangement. And it got picked up in over 150 places before we stopped looking. All the big places picked it up. A lot of food magazines, a lot of newspapers picked it up, generated in excess of $10 million in revenue that went to help these restaurants that were closed. One press release that would have cost a few $100s, but I had done it as a courtesy because it seemed like a really cool concept. And I think that, that shows the leverage opportunity with PR. If you have something that's really newsworthy and you get out there, it can really go viral and go big. And I think it did so well because there was a lot of negative news at the time and uncertainty.
Of course.
And here was something positive, and it was something actionable, something you, safe, quarantined in your home, could go online, nominate your favorite restaurant. If they accepted, you could give them money, and it would help them. And it felt like you were helping your community.
No, I think that just shows how powerful like press releases are to the public. Like it was a free one, but let's say it cost $300 to have gone. It generated millions of dollars for restaurants during a time where they couldn't generate any income because they were closed down for the protection of the community and that. So like, it just goes to show. I do want to ask you about Harpo. Do you use Harpo or do you not use Harpo? And for my audience that doesn't know what Harpo is help a reporter out when they have stories and all that. So I'm wondering if you use that or if you started using that.
So I do not use Help a Reporter Out. I played with it years and years ago. And what I found that was initially, it was a little secret and not a lot of people knew about it. And you could have a pretty good success rate writing a pitch when they had a post or getting your clients to write a little pitch. And sometimes you would get like 1 out of every 5 or 6 that you responded to, you could get an article. What I found now is it's very saturated. And so now you're competing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. It's very difficult to navigate that noise. And I know of very few people that get solid successes outside of something that's very esoteric, where very few companies would apply or be a good subject for that story. That's the only places I hear that it works anymore. And it's a shame because it's a really cool concept. But just like email and everything else, when I started, I was emailing journalists and they were like, do we have to pay for this? And I was like, no, it's free. And they're like, yes, sign me up. Now you ask a journalist, can I email you? They're like, no, I get too much email. No, thanks. So yeah, there's been a shift.
No, I wanted to, because that is something I saw as well, because I played around with it during the pandemic because I heard about how awesome it was. And yeah, getting any quotes or getting any traction with that is a lot of hard work. So I'm glad to hear someone who's in the PR firm doing press releases says maybe not, cool down on that. We are coming close to the end here, Mickie, and I'm having such a fun time learning about the world of PR and how much powerful doing a release is. But we are going to jump to the spark question of the show. So I would like to know, if you could relive a day from your past without changing anything, what day would it be?
Let's see. I think it was when my online ordering system went live. We had hobbled together previously this complex way in which to work with us and get us a Word document. And then we'd have to do a manual word count of the document and get back to the customer with what they had to pay. And then they paid. It was convoluted. And finally, we were able to get a programmer to have it so that when you upload a Word document, it does a word count and can charge them accordingly. And they can change the word count, make it smaller and upload it. Unfortunately, the wire charges extra for extra words and things like that. But I found that very exciting because it was a game changer. This very mechanical way that we were interacting as an e-commerce business was a little embarrassing. And once we were able to solve that, which was no easy feat, according to our developer, it was a game changer.
I can only imagine, it taking time and effort, having to create the old way must have been so time consuming because you get like 20 of them and then you're like, okay, I have to count these. And obviously like word processors have that word count, but then you still have to upload it. Okay, does this count it? Oh, I'm glad you got that solved out. And so it was an easy, more smooth segment that they could do it pretty much instantaneously. Mickie, I'm going to jump off stage here. I want you to let my audience know where they can work with you if they have any PR releases that they want to go out. Might as well go with someone like yourself who's been featured on the show. So please let my audience know where they can connect with you and use your services.
Sure. So our website is eReleases.com. We have no salespeople. There's no commissions or quotas. We're accessible through email and chat. Our social media is on the lower right. Feel free to reach out to us if you have something you want us to take a look at, or you're new to PR and you're trying to figure it out. Feel free to reach out to us. I do have a free masterclass. That's a great place to start for people. It basically teaches you the strategic types of press releases that are more likely to get media pickup. And it's available at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's free. It's about an hour audit that you would take with your business. And I think you'll come away with really meaningful ideas of press releases that if you did do a PR campaign, you would get some media success.
Awesome. Mickie, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing your expertise with PRs, PR releases. Am I back on stage here? Give me 1 second. My computer's a little slow. I just want to make sure. There we go. So sorry about that. Mickie, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. It was awesome talking with you today about your business, eReleases, and all the amazing stuff that you've done.
Well, you're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk about PR and press releases.
To my audience, make sure you check out the show notes down below. They'll have all the links to Mickie's stuff, especially the free PR. It's going to be one of the top links there. And as always, remember to invest in yourself.